Hey guys, welcome to the YouTube channel. Today I'm doing a sequel to an earlier video I did titled You Don't Need 4K Blu-ray. So this is a part 2 of sorts. And I'm going to extend a bit more on some topics I talked about in the original video. And I'm also going to add some new takes. So stay tuned and you may learn a thing or two about why you may not need 4K Blu-ray. So thanks for joining me today. As I mentioned, today is a part 2 to my earlier video, You Don't Need 4K Blu-ray. And the first topic I want to talk about in this video is, over the years, 4K Blu-ray has become somewhat of a keeping up with the Joneses exercise. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, for the most part, 4K Blu-ray is a much better looking, much more well presented in terms of video quality format than Blu-ray or even DVD. The resolution has never been higher. It is now full HD. So now, when we get to 4K Blu-ray, we have the dilemma of the cost and people using it, especially in the collecting community, as a look at how good I am, I have this much. Now, I'm guilty of that in the past as well. I have collected a lot of 4K, but a lot of that was because I wanted it and I wanted to have it in my collection. There are some collectors out there who get 4K Blu-rays, will get it graded and say, okay, this is a 10 out of 10, I'm selling this for $1,000 and whatever. So I feel like that has really hurt the collector community, and that has really put a lot of newer collectors off even getting in. When you see eBay and all third-party websites selling Blu-rays that are out of print, or even 4Ks that are out of print, you come past some things like Bad Boys and Bad Boys 2 on 4K, which these can easily go upwards of $70 to $100 for the Australian versions. These are out of print. And there are scalpers who will get these graded and try to sell them for $1,000. So when collectors look at it and say, oh, well, you know, I want to have Bad Boys, but I don't want to pay $1,000 for Bad Boys in 4K, why would I get into the format? And so a lot of younger collectors and a lot of newer collectors and a lot of even older collectors who may not have that money to spare, a lot of people who may not have the money to drop $100 on a 4K Blu-ray are really looking at it like, why would I buy a 4K Blu-ray for $100 when I can get the Blu-ray equivalent for pennies? I can get it for $10, I can get it for $5. And that begs the question, is there a real difference for most films between the Blu-ray version and the 4K version? Can you tell a difference when you put in a Blu-ray and a 4K version? Now, obviously, if you're taking it out yourself and putting it in the player and all that other stuff, you'll know which version you're watching. But let's say you put a side-by-side comparison, two TVs, one with Blu-ray upscaling, one with the native 4K version. You put them side by side. The movie was shot on a digital intermediate, so it tops out at 1080 or even like full HD. It tops out at full HD, but it's been upscaled through the release, which is a common thing of movies that were shot in the 2000s getting upscaled for the new formats, because obviously they didn't have the resolution. Can you really tell a difference? Now, some people say, yeah, I can tell the difference. The color grade's so much better. Dolby Vision, sound, Dolby Atmos. But can you really tell a difference? Like, if you put them side by side, same TV, same setup, same everything, can you really tell a difference? Now, obviously you can with stuff like 2001, where it's drawing from the original camera negative. Interstellar as well. Both of those movies were shot on 65, 70 mil. So, and when I say mil, I say millimeter film. But something like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that was shot on, I believe, 16mm. That's going to top out at full HD resolution anyways, even when you rescan it in higher formats, because 16mm film can hold a lot of information, but it really is at its technological limits. So when we talk about new sort of formats like 4K, I don't believe you're going to really see, for the most part, with a lot of older films and even with some of the newer stuff shot when people started shooting digitally, especially in the early years of digital, such as Star Wars, Phantom Menace, you're going to really see upscaling used. And in upscaling, you're going to see digital noise reduction used. Now, a lot of people have pointed out at the bad restorations. When you're dropping money on a 4K Blu-ray, you're kind of putting your hard-earned towards a copy that you think is going to benefit you. And when you see a job like Terminator 2, where is Terminator 2 here? Let me just grab Terminator 2 because I am going to reference it. When you see Terminator 2 and the restoration they did where they changed the color grade on this. So Cameron has taken a lot of the Californian sunsets, those bright oranges that Terminator 2 was famous for. Cameron has decided in this restoration that blue and bleak is a bit more fitting for the Terminator. Now, don't get me wrong, some people prefer that. Some people prefer how it looks now. And Cameron has even come out and criticized collectors for sitting there and going frame by frame and comparing his work and just enjoy the movie, just watch it. But when it's drastically changed like Terminator 2 was, are you really getting the best version for the 4K? Yes, it's the newest version. Yes, it's the latest official version. It is backed by James Cameron. But is this version the true way to experience it? Or do you pull your Blu-ray off the shelf, if I can get it out? Like, Skynet is not the greatest version now either. This is Skynet edition, but I would say this is drastically better than the 4K version. And why is that? Because the restoration used for 4K is obviously Dolby Vision is a thing now, and HDR. So a lot of directors are going back and recolor grading their films. As we saw with Lord of the Rings on 4K, sort of fog was introduced at some of the flashback scenes because Peter Jackson doesn't believe that people can tell the difference between a flashback and modern day. So it kind of ruins what was originally there. And there are still Lord of the Rings collectors who will say the DVDs are the definitive way to experience those Lord of the Rings movies. 4K and Blu-ray had issues of their own. But this is what I'm getting to. The difference in technology and the difference in the way these films are handled, especially when the restoration process, is kind of at a point now where it's left to interpretation. Obviously, look, people like James Cameron, people like Christopher Nolan and Lucas and so on, will go back and look at their older films and say, yeah, I didn't really like that, let's fix that up. As Titanic was, one of my favorite movies, Titanic. That movie was restored in 2012, and Cameron replaced the sky in one scene because he wanted to be more in line, more scientifically accurate to what the film, the actual movie was showing and what the sky would have looked like. So he changed that to fit with what the sky would have looked like on the night the Titanic sank. You might say it helps overall with the immersion of Titanic, but if you were a fan of the original and wanted it to be as pure to the cinema experience that people went and seen in 1997, sorry to tell you, but that version is now erased. I mean, you can still get it on older formats like DVD and even VHS, even Laserdisc. And there are still cinemas screening the 1997 print in 70mm. Like in Sydney, there is the Randwick Ritz that I believe have a copy of the 70mm negative. So, or real, I should say. So, it's really a matter of, are you really seeing it as it was originally intended? Is it preserving it for a later generation? Obviously, with so many changes made, it's not the version people would have seen in 1997 with Titanic, or even with Star Wars. The one people would have seen in 79 or 77. 1977 would have had a drastically different version of Star Wars than what we see today on 4K. And you see collectors communities online restoring stuff like Star Wars, and I can't go into the stuff with all that and the moral dilemma of that, but my belief is that if it's not readily available and the studios are making it, like essentially making it known that they're never putting out the official release of the original trilogy, then I say restoration-wise and preservation-wise, the community needs to do what they need to do to preserve the original master or preserve the original copy. Now, I don't believe that's the way for every film, but this is what we're getting into now. We're getting into the stage where directors more and more are going back and altering their films. And 4K is a big problem with that. There is a lot of directors going back and changing things for the 4K restoration. And we've got to talk about personal enjoyment versus flexing. Because another big topic is that, yes, 4K is great. I love experiencing a 4K movie, especially when it's done right, like Christopher Nolan gets it right more of the time. But there are certain times where I'll look at it and be like, okay, didn't really like that movie, but I'll have it in the collection just so I can say, yeah, I've got it. Like, I didn't like M. Night Shyamalan's latest, one of his latest movies, Old. I didn't really like that movie. I experienced it for the first time on 4K Blu-ray, bought it, had it in my collection, watched it, had to try to watch it 3 times, or not 3 times overall. I had to sit down and watch it 3 separate times to get through that one movie. So I stopped it, turned it off, came back later, watched it again, watched a bit more, stopped it, went away. It was so hard to sit through. But yet I've still got it in the horror section over here. I still have it here instead of selling it, because part of me is like, well, if anyone asks if I have Old, there it is, I've got it. It's on Blu-ray 4K in my collection. And this is the keeping up with the Joneses thing I mentioned earlier. You feel like you need to have it, and that's not the case. If you don't enjoy the movie, why do I still have Old? And yes, I'm a collector. I preserve the movies as they are. I like to collect. I'm somewhat of a librarian. But it's also a matter of, sometimes you just don't need to have that much. Sometimes you don't need the 4K version just to enjoy your favorite movies. And the cost versus DVD and Blu-ray is so massive at the moment that it actually doesn't make sense financially to get into 4K Blu-ray. As I mentioned a bit earlier, Bad Boys and Bad Boys 2, out of print in Australia. These copies can easily go for $100 each, depending on the collector who buys them. But, you know, you might be able to get the same version of that movie on Blu-ray for maybe $7, $8, or even cheaper. Sometimes people will sell them for $5, maybe even $1. The DVD version you might even get for free. And you are paying almost 100 times that, maybe 50 times that, to get it on 4K Blu-ray because it's out of print and because the scalpers have got to it essentially and said, you know what, we're going to get a color grade, not color graded, we're going to get graded so it's a 10 out of 10, and we're going to try to sell it for 1,000 times more than it's actually worth. So the cost versus DVD and Blu-ray is actually not viable. And I would say it comes down to the individual collecting saying, is this worth it? Is this copy of this movie that you love worth buying? And I would say in some cases, yes. I would say in some cases, no. Like, one of the movies I bought recently was The Crow on 4K. And I know I wanted this movie. I'm keeping it sealed, obviously, because, yeah, one of my favorite movies, The Crow. And I really wanted this on 4K Blu-ray. I didn't need it, but I really wanted it. And I wanted the Steelbook. Now, obviously for me, I analyzed the cost of this. The full price cost was $64. I didn't pay that much because I got it on sale. I believe I got it for $47. But this movie is something that I analyzed and said, okay, what am I getting? Do I want it? Do I actually need it? And at the end of the day, I said, yes, I do really want that in my collection. But you can actually go onto YouTube and see 1,000 different reviews of these things before you actually put your money down and say, okay, what am I getting? What's the restoration like? Frame by frame comparison. Some YouTubers do that. You can look at them and say, okay, it's got that problem, but it's got these benefits. It's got the menus that don't look that great, but the content's there. And that's another thing we've got to talk about. The menus. Now, a lot of people growing up would have grown up in the DVD era. If you're younger than that, how do I explain this? Just try to find a video on YouTube of the Shrek 2 menu. I might put a still frame in here of the Shrek 2 menu. But essentially, Shrek 2 had an animation menu where Shrek and all the characters were all talking to each other in the menu, and you could go to, as you were moving around the menu, it was like a little Easter egg of, hey, you're watching this and being entertained on the main menu. Whereas these days, all you see is just a generic locked off shot of the movie, of like the poster, and then just along the bottom, you'll just say play, special features, audio options. Very much in line with the iTunes menus. And that's kind of hurt the collector market. Because when studios can't be asked to put a proper menu in there and make the menu when they give it the minimal effort and just say, who cares, just put it out, idiots are going to buy it anyways. And that's what essentially they would think. I believe for the most part, the big studios would just say, they're going to buy it anyways, regardless. Just minimal effort, spend a couple of dollars on just putting it onto a disc. Don't worry about the menus. We don't have to sell this. We're not fighting a format war against VHS, which is what happened in the early days where VHS and DVD were really, they weren't competitive, but everyone saw DVD as a successor, but VHS had such market share that DVD coming along had to do great menus. They had to have a great experience. They had to offer special features. They had to offer all these benefits to try to take market share. And yes, I know there was a DivX format out there. I know that there was another format war in DVD, but that never hit Australia. No one in Australia actually cared about that. DVD was the direct successor to VHS in most parts of the world. And when we talk about it, can you actually spot the difference between a Blu-ray and a 4K? With TV upscaling and player upscaling these days, most people cannot tell the difference. You put them side by side and no one can tell, like, if you're not a trained eye or you're not sitting like literally right on top of the TV, I think most people are going to say, oh, yeah, they're essentially the same thing. I mean, this one looks a bit better in colors, so I'm going to say it's the 4K, and yeah, most times you'd be right because of the color grade, or Dolby Vision in that case. But for most cases, the average consumer is not going to be able to tell the difference. And that comes to the shiny new format. Blu-ray, 4K Blu-ray is the shiny new format for the modern age. Everyone is starting to adapt to 4K TVs. Now, there are some people who still have their 1080p TVs, 1080i, 720s, even going back to CRTs. There are still people who have CRTs. I'm one of them as well. I have a CRT as well, but I've also got a plasma. I've also got a 4K OLED. I've got multiple technologies because I believe in watching it as it was intended on the technology it was intended for. But not everyone is going to have the latest technology, the latest 4K that can take advantage of it. If you have a Samsung TV, your TV can't even do Dolby Vision. It can do HDR10+, but it can't do that. And if you have a LG TV, like I do, you cannot access HDR10+, because that's locked away to Samsung TVs. So you are kind of like in this zone where if you buy it and it's got HDR10+, your Blu-ray will still look better, but it's going to be locked to HDR10 on your player and your TV. Whereas if you put it on a Samsung TV, it'll be HDR10. But if you had Dolby Vision, it wouldn't work. So there is a lot of things where the average consumer is not going to be able to tell the difference for what they're getting. And the technology just hasn't caught up. In terms of, yes, the technology is there. 4K is there. Blu-ray is still trying to take market share from DVD. And before it even got to that point where Blu-ray was eclipsing DVD, it never eclipsed DVD. And then a new format came behind it that hurt Blu-ray's market share, because it was like, oh, well, if I was going to buy the Blu-ray version, why would I buy that when I can just buy the 4K? And, people would just take the next step, but they'll say, oh, well, it's double the cost of Blu-ray. But I don't want to buy an inferior version to that because I'm putting my hard-earned money down. So a lot of people just said, I don't care, I'm just going to buy the $5 DVD compared to the $40 Blu-ray. This is the dilemma we're in. The shiny new formats are essentially at that point where they are the shiny new formats, and all three of them, the three major formats in collector market, DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K, are all trying to compete with each other while getting massacred by streaming. And look, regardless of what you think of streaming's here to stay. Whether they do ads or not, the general audience, the general consumers are going to choose streaming every time. And the collectors market are going to keep this alive. And I see a lot of collectors saying, oh, well, if you don't buy Blu-rays, if you don't buy 4K, if you don't encourage it, then, oh, well, the format it'll just go away and they won't make any more. Disney have come out and said recently that they were getting out of the Blu-ray production service, and Sony have flagged it a couple of times. But then Disney offloaded it to Sony. I can see the same thing happening where Sony will get out of it and then say, oh, we'll offload it to Paramount. Paramount might do the same thing. But I can see a scenario where Kino Lorber, Criterion, Vinegar Syndrome, Shout Factory, all these other labels can say, okay, Disney don't want to put it out anymore. Can we license this from you and we'll put it out? We'll take a bit of this, you take a bit of that, everyone's happy. And then I could see that happening. A limited run of 5,000 DVDs or 5,000 Blu-rays and 4Ks that are done through like Kino Lorber, and Disney make a partnership. Disney get their little kickback because they get it immediately because they're licensing it. A licensing deal will obviously have better yield for them. And yeah, there will still be people out there. 4K and Blu-ray are not going anywhere. Let me get that straight right now. They're not going anywhere. There are enough labels out there. Like Umbrella in Australia. Umbrella is a powerhouse in Australia. They do a lot of the Australian movies. I mean, I don't know if I can show that. Last Wave, no, I can't show you. Can I show him? Alright, I'm about to show an Indigenous person who's passed away, so if you don't want to see him, yeah. I know his family were very adamant that he can still be shown on film. That was his wishes, so I'm going to show it. But, you know, a movie like with David Gurpolu, Umbrella do really good service with this. They do a really good production with this. So, this movie, Umbrella are doing a lot of the Australian releases and getting them right. Another great movie is Shine, you know. They got a lot of movies like this where they do a really good job of restoring. But, you know, Blu-ray is not going anywhere. There are enough labels around the world invested in it to keep it going. Now, obviously, streaming is the mainstream, but I would say look at 4K and look at Blu-ray as a potential partner to your streaming services. Yes, you'll still have streaming service. Most people will. But if the power goes out, if the internet's down, if there's a massive storm that knocks everything out, look at it as having a physical representation connected to the past. Obviously, you know, a lot of collectors will be like, I loved the video shop vibe of going in and renting the mask or whatever. I've got this on Blu-ray, but I really love this copy. I really love the look of it. I really love the menus on it. But yeah, a lot of people will say, oh yeah, the experience of going there and having something from the past is amazing. But the average consumer is just going to stream it. And I'm not going to go into hard drives full of movies like so many people do. If that's your prerogative, that's your thing to do. But for a collector's community, 4K, the cost that 4K restorations and 4K Blu-ray brings with it can actually be done through Blu-ray and even DVD. Like, you can upscale it pretty well through TVs these days. Now, obviously, you're not going to make a DVD look like 4K resolution. At least, great on your TV. It's not going to look that great if you try to have it guess the information that's not there. But, you know, if I put an old wrestling DVD into my 4K TV from my player, I'm turning off all the upscaling options and watching it as it was intended. And my 4K TV will essentially just show it as it is coming off the disc, and it will look great on my TV because I've calibrated it. But that's the thing, you've got to really analyze, is the cost worth it? And for most people, it's just an exercise of keeping up with the Joneses, and it's meant to be a companion to streaming these days. Now, obviously, I have a much larger collection here that I have essentially tried to replace my streaming options. I have essentially tried to limit how much I stream. Now, obviously, I've still got streaming options, like with Amazon, with The Boys, and so on and so forth. I will still watch them. But, you know, most times I'm coming in here, I'm looking at The Crow, I'm looking at Titanic, I'm looking at all my collection and saying, oh, I want to draw a movie from the collection tonight because I want to watch it and switch off from the world. And that is the biggest benefit to why you should collect 4K, Blu-ray, DVD, any format really. If you want to switch off truly from all the digital things, all the computers, all the internet, then you should really look at collecting just your favorites, or at least a few of them. Because essentially, I can turn off my phone, I can turn off the internet, I can turn off everything, put in a disc, and I'm essentially switched off to the world. I don't care what's happening in the world, I don't want to know what's happening. As far as I know, I am switched off. And that's part of me, obviously, working in a news environment. Obviously, a lot of people know I work in a news environment. Sometimes you just come home from the news and you just kind of want to switch off. You just kind of don't really want to know what's happening in the world for a few hours because you're so aware of so much on any given day that you just want to come home and not know anything. You just want to be ignorant for a little bit, you know? It's kind of, you want to just switch off. Plus, a lot of news people have the dilemma of, if they watch the news, they'll get into news mode and they'll start analyzing it and they'll start analyzing shots and, oh, what's this story? Should I make the call, you know? And Australia just passed a right to disconnect sort of bill, so giving workers the right to switch off. So bringing home work is tough, but essentially that's why I collect, because I love the ability to switch off. And it's not for everyone, but when we're talking about 4K Blu-ray, I want the best possible experience when I decide to switch off. And it's not for everyone. Obviously, streaming does offer some benefits, and 4K offers some benefits. Obviously, Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 3 was a very dark episode that, when it first streamed, was very problematic because there was such dark scenes in it. And obviously, I've got the 4K Blu-ray box set. If I want to watch Game of Thrones back, I can watch that episode as it was originally intended. But for the most part, you need to analyze, is the cost of 4K Blu-ray worth it? Is it worth it for you? Not for the people on YouTube, not for the collector community, not for any of that, not for anyone telling you this is the best it's ever looked. Of course it's the best it's ever looked. It's 4 times the expense of Blu-ray. It's going to look better than the Blu-ray in most cases, except for Terminator 2. But we know how James Cameron feels about us. we're his market, and yeah, he's criticizing us. But, you know, when I talk about this stuff, I love it. I love having it available to me. It's not for everyone. Yes, people say, oh, it's such a cost. You could have a hard drive full of movies and you don't even know. It's like, yeah, I know about hard drives full of movies. I know about that. I was around in the early days of the internet. I know where to go. I know the bay. I know all that stuff. But what I'm talking about is, I love the experience of coming in here and grabbing something off my shelf, like Heat, great movie, Robert De Niro. Great movie. I like the experience of getting this off the shelf, opening it up and saying, okay, there's Al Pacino on the front, Val Kilmer. And I want to remember what this movie's about. I want to go, okay, I haven't watched this in a minute, so yeah, okay. And the best thing about this is it doesn't spoil it with a trailer, where they give you half the plot in the trailer. So yeah, where did I get that from? Up there. Inception, another great movie. I haven't actually watched that in a minute. I might watch this tonight. I'm going to leave that out, because I want to watch that one tonight. I haven't watched Inception in a very long time. May watch it tonight, may not, I don't know. But I'll leave it out for the option so it catches my eyes when I come home later on. And yeah. If you enjoy this video, like, subscribe, drop a comment, and let me know what you think below. I've just rebranded the channel, so it used to be called The Physical Way. Now it's just back to Jamie Toomey Presents. I feel like personalizing the channel will help it long term, and hey, I'll read the comments. I love what you guys have to say. I love the collector community around me. Tell me what you guys think, and I will catch you in the next one. This has been Why You Don't Need 4K Blu-ray, Part 2, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.